because every part has a story of origin, and it continues to have its lesson learned from that story of origin, and that becomes a pattern throughout the rest of our life. I'm Dr. Aimie, your guide for transforming your trauma into your gift. You adapted to life experiences to survive, but you are not your trauma. We have the written communication that we can do with our parts, which given the number of people that I lead through the All Parts of Me course, I still see that as a helpful place to start, because starting with the mind-body dialogue, you're not even sure which part you're talking to yet. And you don't even know that the blending of parts can happen where all of a sudden you have two parts talking to each other rather than true self talking with a part. So for me, that's a very challenging place to start. You eventually get to the place where your communication with your parts is just in constant flow. And there's a mind-body dialogue that can even happen all day long throughout the day, and you don't have to stop and write it out. But as a place to start, that writing is so helpful. And being able to, of course, know how to do that, since we use the two different hands for that. But moving into the mind-body dialogue, let's look at some of the questions that we can use in a mind-body dialogue that are really helpful. And as I go into connecting with a part through a body sensation, that's what I'm doing. I'm asking questions. And of course, all the questions that I'm asking are coming from a place of curiosity. If I ask any other type of question, I'm going to either get silence or I'm going to get the backlash. And I'll show you how I think about that kind of question. So all the questions just need to come from a place of curiosity where I really am just wanting to get to know you. I just want to understand, just want to get to know you. I'm not here to change you. I'm just here to get to know you. Does that sound familiar? Right? That's one of the places we start with in the 21-day journey, with just connecting with our body. I'm here just to get to know you. I'm not here to change you. Now, if change happens in the process, hey, great. But that's not my intention going into this relationship. It's not my intention going into this conversation. And so the curiosity questions are ones where we can start with just, my goodness, like as we connect with a sensation, a curiosity question can even just be, what can I do to support you right now? For me, that's a great place to start because it sets the tone for the conversation. They know that I'm here to support them. And what I have found is that as I then bring in support, whatever that support is it feet support? Is it back support, neck support, stomach support, eye support, whatever the support is that they ask for in that moment, then they are feeling more resourced to be able to have a conversation. So for me, that's been a great place to start with a mind-body dialogue, which is no different. It's no different than the somatic work that we're doing. Isn't that interesting? When we are just doing somatic work, right? And we're not doing parts work, we're just doing somatic work. Isn't that what we do? We notice a body sensation. It feels uncomfortable. And so we're just seeing what we can do to support that body sensation. So we do the same thing when we're connecting with the part behind that body sensation, starting with just, how can I support you right now? And then we can go into some other mind-body dialogue questions, curiosity questions. But oftentimes, it's been my experience that when I provide that support, that part is now so much more open to talking to me. It opens those doors of communication. Sometimes even just with that, it'll start talking and I don't even need to ask any more questions. And it just starts giving me all this information about, I'm feeling afraid about this. This is what's this is what has me activated, or this is the story behind this trigger. It gives me so much information. But if I'm not getting that, then I can ask those questions. Is there a story behind this sensation? Is there a story behind this specific trigger? What is the story? Is there a story behind it? That can be a curiosity question that's part of the mind-body dialogue. Then there can just be the mind-body dialogue questions of, what would you like to say to the brain? And then it can go the opposite direction. Brain, what would you have to say to this part? And those are great ways to gain understanding for what it's trying to say. They each get their time to speak. Neither one of them is wrong, though they will have very different perspectives. Just be prepared for that. But neither one of them is wrong. And so it's just this opportunity to understand where it's coming from and be able to understand the different competing voices in our head of, I should be doing this, for an example, and yet I'm not doing this. And so there's this internal struggle that develops, and being able to understand that, because what you're going to hear from your mind is those words of, yeah, like this part is a problem. It's not doing its job. It's whatever it is. And then being able to hear the perspective from the part of, this is what's going on. This is what I would want you to understand about what I'm doing or how I'm responding in this moment. So those are good questions to have, of just literally like what would you, the brain, what would you want to say to this sensation or to this part? And to the part and sensation, what would you want to say to the brain? And see what answers come up. And then from there, that might be a good time to then speak to the part, and from its perspective, from what it shared of its perspective of, this feels too hard. This feels too big. I'm not getting the support that I need. I'm down here all alone. Whatever it is that comes up, then maybe that could be at the time that you bring in a question around, is there a story behind that? Because every part has a story of origin, and it continues to have its lesson learned from that story of origin, and that becomes a pattern throughout the rest of our life. And so if it's a story of having to take care of your mother, for me, it was having to be the emotional buffer for my father. So then as we go through life, there are times that part gets triggered because it feels like, this situation feels like it could be related. But if we don't know that, if we don't ask, is there a story behind this? We may not ever know the pattern that continues to show up. And so knowing the story of origin, and then, my goodness, how that opens up for us to be able to see all the times that story has continued to pop up in our life, and we've continued to respond and react to that story of origin, but in so many other places in our life. And we can get there through just connecting to the body sensation. That's what's cool. And as the part shares its story of origin, again, usually what happens is that if it's able to do that in a safe space that you are creating for it, that safe space of curiosity and no judgment, there usually will be some form of discharge that happens as it's able to finally, for the first time, share with you its story of origin. Where did this start? And then the possibilities are open for how you can work with that part moving forward, because it's story of origin. And when it pops up next time, you're like, I know your story. I know what you're afraid of. I know what triggers you, because we've had this conversation before, and you can immediately go into supporting that part rather than having to go through all of this mind-body dialogue to even just understand what's wrong. So these mind-body questions that again, we're doing them as we are tracking our body sensations, so that when we are able to get to its story of origin and we feel that release in our body and we feel that discharge and we get that either deep breath or that yawn or whatever it is for you, right? Your body, what those signals are that like you've landed on something that's true. Then that opens up so much for our ability to understand our parts through tracking our body sensations.